It's really important to look at the current Israeli government and to question the way it behaves. I think. I think it's an essential thing that we have to do. Absolutely essential. And we should look at people like Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar ben Gvir. And Itamar ben Gvir posted a tweet, and it's very difficult to look at the current events without looking at his tweet. As long as Hamas fails to release hostages, the only thing that needs to enter Gaza are hundreds of tons of explosives from the Israeli Air Force, not an ounce of humanitarian aid. That's what he says. And behind all this is an obsession which goes all the way back to the foundation of the State of Israel and the Irgun, the campaign of the Irgun. And it's an Israeli word. It's rather a beautiful word, hasbara, which means explanation, neutrality. The idea of something like the BBC or any news operation is compromised by hasbara. And hasbara is what we got this evening about the bombing of the hospital. Or hospitals, because there is some story of a further bomb, but it may be the same story, just seen from a different point of view. And an explanation, a hasbara, is a way of controlling the narrative, of explaining the narrative, of developing the narrative, of exorcising the demons of interpretation. There is an interpretation, and it will be the interpretation governed by the Israeli forces. And we go back to people like George Berkeley, Bishop Berkeley, amazing character. He said, esse est percipi. To be is to perceive. Perception is reality. And indeed, modern science, modern astronomy is beginning to suggest that is actually true. What we see of the universe, there's more of it, but we don't see it, so it doesn't need to show itself. It doesn't need to exist until we see it. Extraordinary. Einstein said, reality is an illusion. Of course it is. We are in the control of the magicians of the media, and what they say is what is. And their interpretation, their opinion is truth. And the BBC bangs on about truth. And people in social media bang on about truth. What they mean about truth is that this is the interpretation which is given some sort of divine fiat, some sort of divine imprimatur, some sort of stamp of authority. It's not truth. It's opinion with command. And that may not be truth. There is no such thing as neutrality. There is only a bias that you accept. So it's really important that we listen to other views. And when we look at the implications of hasbara, this is censorship, this is agitprop, this is compromat, all those words which we're so used to, and we're not so used to the word hasbara. And yet hasbara has been in existence since, well, for the last 75 years, and has been used to control the narrative. It's one of the tools of subversion, and Israel is proud of it, so proud of it that you can actually do university studies in Israel in hasbara. Of course, it's a slightly blander version. It's advocacy of the regime, its positive spin, its interpretation in the mildest form. But at its worst, it's propaganda, a digital plough into social media, the world that Prigozhin at his worst would have found impressive. The foundation of his social media trolls, his troll farms, or the propaganda factories. In Russian, the word isn't farm. It's not a troll farm. It's a troll factory, which seems to me to be a much better description. But it is predicated on hasbara. And that hasbara went into full operation in 2012 during the Operation Pillar of Defense, which was one of the first wars against Gaza. And then in 2014, Operation Protective Edge was a further opportunity for this advanced hasbara Mark II. And it's about politics, it's about philosophy, it's about couching the rational against the irrational, the rational Israel, the defensive protector attacked by the offensive rockets from a barbarian and maniacal terror organization called Hamas. And it's all essentially true. This is what is so brilliant about hasbara. It's about the manipulation of truth. But it's the mix that matters. It's the mix and the focus. And we can ask reasonable questions, or at least we should be able to ask reasonable questions, but in the context of hasbara, those questions become impossible. So, is it acceptable to attack the current Israeli policy? No, because that's an attack on Israel, or indeed anti-Semitic. Utter tosh. Utter tosh. It's perfectly possible to dislike Netanyahu. I do. And yet at the same time to approve of the State of Israel in principle. It's perfectly possible, equally, to support the Palestine Authority and at the same time support the State of Israel. I do. It's perfectly possible to support the Gaza Strip or the Gaza community and to decry the Hamas organization. I do, because I don't see that there's any distinction between Hamas and the Qassam Brigade, the military wing of Hamas. They are interchangeable. And yet, within the context of hasbara, it becomes impossible to have much of that conversation. It becomes impossible to have those nuances. You're either on that side or you're on that side. It's either black or white. No, actually, most of us need to be in a muddy area of grey, because that's where debate lies. And without debate, there is no accessing of truth, because truth is constantly shifting as the debate develops. So hasbara is there not to develop the debate, but to stifle that debate and to direct that debate to a particular end. It's there to soften the criticism of Israel, and yet the criticism of Israel is necessary for Israel to emerge as a competent and credible nation in its own right. And Israel is suffocating under hasbara, as any nation suffers under censorship, under propaganda. When any nation is subject to a situation where the narrative is weaponized by a particular group, you can go all the way back to ancient Greece. And while on the one hand, you've got Plato saying that we need to feed the population the big lie, because Plato was very keen on censorship and propaganda, whatever you may think about Plato encouraging the demos. Plato didn't like democracy. Plato wanted a form of aristocracy, the rule of the best, the rule of the philosopher king, and when it was tried in practice, it was a disaster. A disaster. And Aeschylus comments on this. And Aeschylus gives us the line which is often quoted in social media and is attributed to all manner of ridiculous people. The line comes from Aeschylus, one of the great playwrights of ancient Greece. And he said, in war, truth is the first casualty. In war, truth is the first casualty. And, you know, we're 6 centuries on, aren't we? We're 6 centuries on from that. And, oh no, we're not. Oh, my goodness, we're so much more than that. Hi! Yes, there we are. I've got my maths wrong. 4 centuries BC. And we're now in 2023. We're in the second millennia, and of the modern age. So that's Aeschylus. Aeschylus gives us a prototype. Truth is the first casualty of war. We're better at that now. We're significantly better at that because we're using truth itself as a weapon. We have weaponized truth. So when you hear somebody saying truth is the first casualty of war, no, actually, truth has been twisted. With hasbara, truth is the weapon itself. But it's a selective truth. And it only works because we are so obsessed with truth. Actually, we should be obsessed with much more important things like kindness, and there's a good Hebrew word for that, chesed, with kindness, and with the ability to listen, rather than the obsession with telling somebody what something is. And I hope in my YouTube stuff, yeah, I know people say I'm not very consistent. I know people say I keep changing my mind. I do. Isn't that the purpose of some sort of debate? I read the comments, I change my mind. John Maynard Keynes, the most wonderful thinker, don't care much about his economics, but I love his thought. I love his humility. He says, well, he probably didn't say it, actually, but it is attributed to him that he said, when the facts change, I change my mind. And that's the least that any sensible person can do. When the facts change, when the facts have been represented in a different way, I change my mind. Of course I do. That's the thing to do. That's the grown up, that's the mature thing to do, to change our mind when we're given new information.